Hey everyone, the Jedi Survivor trailer revealed a new crossguard lightsaber, and I've already gotten the request for it, so today, I'm going to show you how to make Cal Kestis crossguard lightsaber. First, make Cal Kestis lightsaber. Then, feed it a steady diet of Greeblies and Kyber crystals, and in 2 to 3 weeks, it'll grow a crossguard. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe. Can you hear the pitchforks being sharpened? Alright, for real, let's just get into it. For this build, you'll need EVA foam dowel, PVC pipe cutter, a wooden dowel, silver rubbin buff, wax metallic finish, reflective tape, clear packing tape, scavenged parts, super glue, hot glue, paint, cutting tools, sanding tools, safety gear, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. And a blue kyber crystal. Now for the build. I'm going to use blue PVC pipe because it's a little bit darker, and if any of the paint wears away, which, eventually is likely to happen, it won't be as noticeable as white PVC pipe. In fact, it might even help with the special effects because it's supposed to be blue anyway. It'll look like a bit of a reflection. So now I'm going to draw a rough outline of where I want to cut onto the PVC. It's mostly cut out, sort of like a hyper-extended Graflex lightsaber emitter guard, which honestly makes sense because, if it gets knocked out of his hand in any sort of way, it's easily going to cut his own hand off. Like, I'm pretty sure that's why the lightsaber didn't have cross guards to begin with. Well, also budgetary reasons. I'm also going to mark the area that's going to be buried within the hilt and the area that needs to be cut off. Since these are scrapped, this one is actually the perfect length and doesn't need to be cut off, but I'm still going to mark where it needs to be buried. I'm going to cut these up with a pipe cutter, a hacksaw, or a coping saw, doesn't matter which, and a rotary tool with a narrow bit. Now you do want to be careful with the narrow bit rotary tools because they could hypothetically snap. So you should always wear safety glasses, even if you have regular glasses, because when those bits are spinning, it's kind of like a wheel. So if it contacts the surface, it could conceivably go around. I know I sound crazy, but that has happened before. Additionally, you'll want to wear a mask because melted PVC fumes are pretty horrific, to say nothing of the dust. All right, let's hop to it. Then I locked it in a vise. So the vise is obviously strong enough to crush this. So in order to prevent that, I'm just going to put a dowel in here to support it while I work. Then I continued to slice into it with the rotary tool. There's so much friction during this process that it's not so much grinding away the material as it is melting it away, which can cause a number of complications. You have to pivot as you go, just to make it easier to follow the guidelines. And technically, since there's smoke, there's fire. See that? That's not dust, that's smoke. When I was finished making the cut, I removed the unwanted piece. It's hanging on there by a thread. Now this is still a very rough cut, so I refined it even further at my main workstation, starting by trimming the ends with side cutters. In order to make the end rounded, I then sanded it with a drum-shaped rotary bit. This was too big for that inner curve, so I swapped it out with a smaller one to finish up the job. Finally, I whittled away the flash with a razor pen. Next, I used a PVC cutter to remove the extra length from the longer PVC. Now that they match, they're ready to paint. I painted them gloss black latex acrylic house paint, which will help the top coat pop. Then I skewered them to a piece of foam and set them aside to dry. While they're drying, I'll take this opportunity to go over the rest of the hilt construction. I covered this in a previous video, so if any of it seems unclear, it's probably because I'm glossing over this a bit. You can check out that original video, but I really haven't changed my method since then. I think the only thing I do differently now is I have like one of those narrow PVC pieces like I used for the cross hilts running down the length of the inside of the blade, but that's specifically to match a cylindrical blade, and I still have the original blade for this prop, which is triangular, so why change it if it ain't broke, It's all just cardstock and foam. I'm going to start with a foam dowel from the cosplay section of Michaels. Then I guessed the length of the small hilt using my hand as a reference. I'm doing this because video game characters are never proportioned anywhere close to actual humans. I'll be connecting the two hilts with a magnet and a washer, so I traced that circumference onto the bottom of the dowel. Then I used a razor pen to cut out an alcove, and before closing it up, I drilled a guide hole that's going to be for the blade later. I placed in the magnet and superglued the cardstock over it. Then I cut the second, longer hilt. That cut came out a little bit jagged, so I'm going to level it on my belt sander. Now that the surface is level, the overall saber won't look bent. I used the same method as before to insert a metal washer into the second hilt. This magnet is actually so strong that I can get away with just using a washer instead of an identical magnet. It came out of a paperweight. I had an identical one, but it was impossible to separate, and I think it would probably destroy the saber before it came apart. I built out the sides of the hilt using craft foam. This will both bulk up the hilt and simulate the technological machine aspect. I'm attaching these with super glue. On foam props, I usually use contact cement, but on props this small, it's kind of more trouble than it's worth. Not to mention, it's like super expensive right now. I cut a narrower foam dowel in half to make a curved detail. You don't have to do this. They sell foam half dowels. I'm just trying to get through my entire supply before I buy any more foam. I halved it one more time, I guess quartered it, to make the detail at the end. At this point, you don't have to follow the build exactly. If you want to customize it based on your in-game version, then by all means. This is a suggestion, not a command. For the button details, I use foam circles that are a byproduct of my DRD builds, cut using hollow pen casings, and for the flatter ones, I'm using the offcuts from Ben Eady's chainmail foam that he sent me. Thanks, Ben! Alright, so there's your basic sear lightsaber. Before painting, I need to do some work on the longer hilt. I wrapped parts of it in craft foam and made the slope by cutting a foam triangle out of a larger foam triangle, also from Michaels. Added more thin craft foam strips for details. Then I put in a base coat of black just on the grip part for now. I have to paint in stages like this before I attach the grid pattern for reasons that will become apparent in a little bit. Like 3 hours for me, 3 minutes for you. While that dries, I'm gonna paint the shorter hilt. I started by heat sealing it with my heat gun. I'm taking advantage of the magnetic aspect so that I can paint and not get any on my hands. This is a very professional prop making tool left over from war. I don't know. Why do I have this? Some garage sale. Guys, garage sales are great for just random Star Wars parts. Luke Skywalker's lightsaber is a battery case, and I found 3. This itty bitty hammer will make setting it up to dry easier than the ordnance. Now I can get back to the main hilt. For the tuning fork parts, I started with cardboard as a base for its strength, you know, because cardboard is known for its strength and durability. I cut it up and attached craft foam. Then I attached them to the hilt itself. Then for the grip pattern, I cut up some screen door mesh and superglued it around the hilt. Now I can paint the rest of it using the leftover gloss black from my alien build. This is why I had to put a base coat on the grip first, because getting all of those tiny little squares would have been impossible afterwards just because of surface tension. When those dried, I applied a top coat of silver rub and buff. Molotov will come out shinier, but that's not the look I'm going for. So that's a sear lightsaber, Cal double saber, and you can always just make 2 of the longer hilt and stick them together to make the original Gyro saber. This is kind of 4 builds in one. You guys are getting a deal. Now for the blades. I'm gonna need a kyber crystal. Luckily I sell them in my Etsy store, link below, so I'm just gonna grab one from my inventory. I inserted the kyber crystal to make the saber glow. By now the paint is dry on the mini emitters, so I removed them from their paint stand and prepped them for a top coat of silver. Oh, but before that, I'll need to cut a hole in my original hilt using a leather hole punch. That might be too big, so I'm gonna test it out on some scrap first. Just barely snug enough. Okay, that'll work. It's also a good way to make rivets. Always save the offcuts, because if you end up with a project where you gotta make a ton of rivets, like anything pre-1950, it's just making rivets, it gets real old real fast. Just saying. Now that I'm sure of the size, I hollowed out the saber, which went far better than I could have predicted. Like even I'm shocked. I can't believe the paint held up. You know, I'm gonna save those. Yeah, not sure for what, but I'm gonna hang on to those. And thus Jake's descent into hoarding has begun. I'm just kidding. That happened decades ago. Once it was hollowed out, I placed a dab of super glue on the blue end of each pipe and inserted them into the hilt. I waited a minute for them to dry, probably 49 seconds longer than I had to wait, but you always want to err on the side of caution. Then I coated the exterior in silver rub and buff metallic finish so that it would match the hilt. See, okay, that's where my technique has changed since then. Nowadays, I use Molotov Chrome because it's so much shinier. But in this case, that would differentiate it too much with the old hilt. So it makes more sense to just use my older techniques because the newer one would look like a mistake. Just saying. Yeah, you gotta think about these things. Okay, now it is easier to do this before gluing them in, but I specifically wanted that dark line where each emitter meets the body of the hilt so that it would match the dirt buildup look of the rest of it. Or would that be grease? I think that would be grease. Lightsaber motor oil. Then I made the little blades out of an old wooden dowel, which I first test fitted and then cut down by insulting it relentlessly. No, I'm just kidding, I used a coping saw. It's important that it has a loose fit first off because we're about to wrap it in a bunch of layers of tape, which is going to increase the diameter. So if it had a snug fit to begin with, then you just wouldn't be able to get it in there. I sanded off the splinters, takes half a second. When it was the proper length, I covered it in reflective safety tape meant for bicycles, starting at the ends, just because I forgot them in the last saber I did like this. And I can't not see it now. It represents half a pixel, but I can see it every time, in every frame. Then I cover the dowel lengthwise with 2 strips of reflective tape. You'll notice the tape reads as white to the camera, even though in real life it's a metallic gray color. A silver, if you will. Almost as if that's where you get the phrase silver screen. It's movie screen material. I do this mostly to save myself headaches when I put in the blades in After Effects. And I know that sounds crazy, but this is actually what they did for the original trilogy. It was almost entirely an in-camera effect. All they added in post was the color. Now in real life, it's only gonna look as bright as the room you're in, but when photographed with the flash on, it looks like a real lightsaber, which is especially good for because those LED sabers, under a camera flash, you can see all the individual LEDs and they come across looking kind of fake. But the reflective tape saber looks crazy intense. And that's just the flash from my phone. If you want to get the oscillating effect, you can check out my Ray Saber build video. In fact, I have a lightsaber playlist. You could just binge that and it should answer any question you might have. Now that the technical stuff is out of the way, I inserted the blades, which is easier said than done. I think the strength of the heat. The temperature in the shop fluctuates wildly. Okay, here's a test. I don't know, I can see, just from my perspective, it looks very dark gray. But I can see, even from here on the viewfinder, that is so bright. I could almost get away with not doing the overlay effect if I just soft focus. Alright, now let's go for a beauty shot worthy of a YouTube video thumbnail. And that's how to make a Jedi Survivor cross-guard lightsaber. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, then you can subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Once again, I'd like to thank my patrons. If you feel like joining them so I can make even more elaborate build videos such as armor and vehicles, then you can follow the link in the description below. What's your favorite lightsaber that I haven't built? Let me know in comments below. Thanks for watching. Happy crafting. See you later.